Pay close attention, because what you are about to hear will contradict everything you have been told about power, about respect, and about the way you carry yourself in this world. You have been lied to, not by one person, not by one institution, but by an entire culture that trained you to believe that the loudest voice in the room is the strongest. That confidence means volume. That authority means aggression. And that if you want to be respected, you need to demand it, fight for it, prove it with every breath you take. That is the lie. And it has been costing you everything. Let me ask you something. Think about the most powerful person you have ever met. Not the richest, not the most famous, the most powerful. The one who walked into a room and something shifted. The air changed, people adjusted, conversations paused. Was that person shouting? Were they waving their arms? Were they interrupting everyone desperate to be heard? No. They were quiet. They were still. They moved slowly, spoke deliberately, and every word that left their mouth landed like a stone dropped into still water. You felt it. Everyone felt it. And no one could explain why. That is what this video is about. Not cheap tricks. Not manipulation tactics you forget in a week. This is about rewiring the way you exist in the presence of other human beings. This is about becoming the kind of person who does not chase respect, but radiates it. The kind of person who does not raise their voice because they do not need to. The kind of person Machiavelli described centuries ago when he wrote about the prince who rules not through fear of his sword, but through the weight of his silence. You are about to learn something dangerous. Not dangerous because it is violent. Dangerous because once you understand it, you cannot unsee it. You will start to notice who has real power and who is performing it. You will see through the masks. You will understand why some people dominate every room without saying a single word, and why others talk endlessly and are forgotten the moment they leave. And more importantly, you will understand which one you have been and which one you are about to become. Stay with me. Every minute of this video is designed to carve something into your mind that does not fade. Now let us begin with the uncomfortable truth. You have been chasing respect the wrong way. And I do not say this to insult you. I say this because almost everyone does. Society has programmed a specific response into you. When someone disrespects you, your instinct is to react, to defend yourself, to raise your voice, clench your jaw, prove that you are not weak. When you feel invisible in a group, your instinct is to talk more, to insert yourself, to make sure people know you exist. When someone challenges your authority, your instinct is to push back harder, louder, faster. And every single time you do this, you lose. Not because you are wrong, but because you are playing the wrong game entirely. You are playing the game of reaction, and the person who reacts is never the one in control. Think about it. When a dog barks at a lion, does the lion bark back? When a child throws a tantrum, does a wise parent scream louder? When a king is insulted by a peasant, does he draw his sword? No. Because reaction is the language of the powerless. It is the confession that someone else has the ability to move you, to shake you, to pull you out of your center. And the moment they see that, your power is gone. It does not matter what words you use after that. It does not matter how clever your comeback is. The damage is done. You have shown them that they have access to your interior, and that is a vulnerability no strong person can afford. Machiavelli understood this with a clarity that most people still do not possess. In The Prince, he did not write about leaders who screamed orders from their thrones. He wrote about leaders who understood the architecture of perception. He understood that power is not about what you do. It is about what people believe you can do. And belief is shaped not by noise, but by presence. Not by words, but by weight. Not by volume, but by gravity. There is a reason this was never taught to you. Think about it carefully. Who benefits from you being loud? Who profits from your emotional reactions? The answer is simple. Everyone except you. When you are loud, you are predictable. When you are reactive, you are controllable. When you chase validation, you hand the steering wheel of your life to whoever is watching. The system, whether it is social, professional, or personal, is designed to reward noise because noise is easy to manage. A loud person tells you everything: their insecurities, their triggers, their breaking points. They lay it all out in the open every time they raise their voice. But a quiet person, a person who watches, who waits, who responds only when they choose to, that person is terrifying, not because they are aggressive, but because they are unreadable. And what is unreadable is uncontrollable. And what is uncontrollable commands respect by default, because people instinctively defer to what they cannot predict. This is the first principle you must burn into your mind. Respect is not given to the loudest. It is given to the most composed. It is given to the person who seems to have something behind their eyes that they are choosing not to reveal. It is given to the one who makes others wonder what they are thinking, what they know, what they would do if pushed too far. That mystery, that quiet gravity, is worth more than 1,000 arguments won. More than 1,000 clever retorts, more than 1,000 displays of aggression. And the beautiful, almost cruel irony is this: the less you try to command respect, the more it flows toward you. The less you demand attention, the more people give it. The less you speak, the more weight your words carry. This is not a paradox. This is architecture. This is the design of human psychology, and Machiavelli mapped it out 500 years before modern psychology gave it a name. Now let me take you deeper into why this works, because understanding the mechanism is what separates knowledge from transformation. Human beings are wired to assess threat and value within seconds of meeting someone. This is not a conscious process. It happens in the ancient, reptilian part of the brain that still thinks in terms of survival. And here is what that part of the brain responds to. Not words, not credentials, not titles. It responds to stillness. It responds to calm in the face of chaos. It responds to the person who does not flinch when the room gets tense. It responds to controlled energy. Because in the primal language of the nervous system, the one who is calm is the one who is dangerous. The one who is still is the one who has already calculated every possible outcome. The one who does not react is the one who does not need to, because they are already ahead. Think about predators in the wild. The lion does not pace frantically before the hunt. The hawk does not flap wildly before the dive. They are still. They are focused. Every ounce of energy is contained, compressed, waiting. And when they move, it is with precision so absolute that the prey does not even understand what happened until it is over. That is the energy you must cultivate, not the energy of the barking dog, the energy of the predator at rest. When you walk into a room with this energy, contained, unhurried, deliberate, something happens that you cannot fake. People feel it. They do not know what it is. They cannot name it. But they feel it. Their posture changes. Their voice adjusts. They become slightly more careful with their words around you. Not because you demanded it, not because you threatened them, but because your presence communicated something that their subconscious understood immediately. This person is not performing. This person is real. This person has weight. And that is the difference between authority and noise. Authority does not announce itself. It arrives, it sits down, and the room reorganizes around it. Now, here is where most people fail. They hear this, and they think silence means passivity. They think being quiet means being a doormat. They think composure means weakness. And this is the trap that keeps most people locked in the cycle of reactivity forever. Because there is a universe of difference between silence born of fear and silence born of power. The person who is quiet because they are afraid to speak is not commanding respect. They are hiding. But the person who is quiet because they have chosen to observe, because they are gathering information, because they understand that every word spent carelessly is power wasted, that person is operating on a completely different level. Machiavelli wrote that a prince must be like a fox and a lion. The fox to recognize traps, the lion to frighten wolves. But notice, neither the fox nor the lion wastes energy on theatrics. The fox is silent because silence keeps it alive. The lion is still because stillness preserves its dominance. You must learn to be both, to see what others miss because you are not busy performing, to strike with precision because you have not exhausted yourself with noise. Let me give you a scenario that will make this visceral. Imagine you are in a meeting. A colleague publicly challenges your idea. Their tone is dismissive, maybe even mocking. The room watches. Everyone is waiting for your response. This is the moment that defines you. The old version of you, the reactive version, would fire back immediately. Defend yourself. Match their energy. Raise your voice to prove you are not intimidated. And what would happen? A verbal tennis match. Back and forth. Escalating. And even if you win the argument, you lose something far more valuable. You lose your composure. You lose the perception of being in control. You become just another person who can be provoked. Now imagine a different response. They challenge you. You pause. Not a hesitant pause, a deliberate one. You look at them, not with anger, not with aggression, with calm recognition, as if you are studying something mildly interesting. And then, after the room has gone completely still, after everyone is leaning in, waiting, you respond. Slowly, clearly, without a trace of emotion. You address the substance of their challenge with precision, and you do so with a tone that makes it clear you are not defending yourself. You are educating them. What happens in that room? Power shifts, completely, silently, irreversibly, because you did not fight for respect. You demonstrated it. You showed everyone watching that this person's provocation did not touch you. It did not reach you. You exist at a depth they cannot access with cheap tactics. And that is terrifying to anyone who relies on emotional manipulation to feel powerful. This is not theory. This is the lived experience of every person who has ever learned to weaponize their composure. And it works in every arena of life. In the boardroom, in relationships, in conflict, on the street, in negotiations, in every single interaction where respect is at stake. But you must understand something critical before we go further. This is not an act. You cannot fake composure. You cannot pretend to be unbothered while rage is churning inside you. People sense incongruence the way animals sense a storm. If your body is tense while your words are calm, they will read the tension, not the words. If your eyes are darting while your voice is steady, they will read the fear, not the steadiness. The exterior must match the interior. And that means this work does not start with your behavior. It starts with your mind. Machiavelli knew that the prince who controls himself controls the kingdom. And the prince who cannot control his own emotions will eventually be controlled by those who can provoke them. This is not about suppressing what you feel. It is about training yourself to process what you feel before it reaches the surface. It is about building an interior architecture so solid that external provocations hit the walls and dissolve before they ever reach the core. And this is the part that separates the pretenders from the truly powerful. Because anyone can memorize tactics. Anyone can read a book about body language and practice standing a certain way. But the person who has actually done the inner work, who has confronted their own triggers, their own insecurities, their own desperate need for validation, That person does not need tactics. They have transformed. And transformation is the only thing that cannot be faked. So as we move forward, understand that what I am giving you is not a performance manual. It is a blueprint for internal revolution. Every principle, every technique, every insight is designed not just to change how you appear, but to change what you are. Because when what you are changes, everything around you changes with it. People do not decide to respect you. They cannot help it. Respect becomes the natural response to your presence, the way silence becomes the natural response to a mountain. You do not ask a mountain to prove it is strong. You look at it and you know. That is what you are building. And we are just getting started. If you have understood this, if something in these words has struck a nerve that you have been ignoring for too long, then stay with me. Because what comes next will show you exactly how to construct this silent authority from the inside out. We are going to dismantle the habits that have been bleeding your power for years. We are going to rebuild the way you speak, the way you move, the way you respond, and the way you occupy space. Not with gimmicks, with architecture. The same architecture that Machiavelli understood, that the great strategists of history mastered, and that the quietly powerful people in your own life have been using whether they know it or not. The loudest era of your life is over. What comes next is something far more lethal. Your silence. Before we dive into the mechanics of silent authority, I need to show you something about yourself that you probably do not want to see. But this is not the kind of video that coddles you. This is the kind that cuts into you and rebuilds what it finds. You have a pattern, and it has been running your life without your permission. Every time you have been in a situation where you felt disrespected, overlooked, or dismissed, your body activated a response that was programmed into you long before you had the awareness to question it. Your heart rate increased, your jaw tightened, your mind began racing through possible responses, what to say, how to say it, how to win. And in that moment, something happened that you probably never noticed. You stopped thinking and started reacting. You stopped being strategic and started being emotional. You stopped being the chess player and became the chess piece. And this pattern did not start yesterday. It started in childhood, when you learned that the only way to be heard was to be loud. When you learned that silence meant agreement. When you learned that if you did not defend yourself immediately, you were weak. These lessons were taught to you by people who were themselves trapped in the same cycle. Your parents, your teachers, your peers, the culture you grew up in. Everyone was performing the same exhausting theater of reactivity, and you learned your lines perfectly. But here is what no one told you. The script was written by people who never held real power. The people who taught you to react were people who spent their entire lives reacting. The people who taught you to raise your voice were people whose voices were never truly heard, no matter how loud they became. You inherited a strategy for weakness and mistook it for strength. And every time you followed that script, you moved further from the respect you were trying to earn. Machiavelli saw this pattern in the rulers of his time. He watched princes lose their kingdoms, not because they lacked armies, but because they lacked composure. He watched leaders crumble, not because their enemies were stronger, but because their enemies were calmer. He watched men of great potential destroy themselves by confusing aggression with authority, noise with influence, reaction with control. And he wrote The Prince not as a celebration of cruelty, but as a manual for those who were willing to see the game as it truly is, stripped of illusion and sentimentality. The game is this. Whoever controls the emotional temperature of an interaction controls the interaction. Full stop. It does not matter who has the better argument. It does not matter who is right. It does not matter who started it. The person who remains composed while the other person escalates is the person who walks away with the power, every single time. And this is not just philosophy. This is neuroscience. When you remain calm in the face of someone else's emotional storm, their brain begins to do something remarkable. it starts to mirror your state. This is called neural entrainment, the tendency of the human nervous system to synchronize with the dominant emotional frequency in its environment. And here is the critical insight. The dominant frequency is not the loudest. It is the most stable. It is the most grounded. It is the one that does not waver. So when someone raises their voice at you, and you respond with measured calm, you are not just protecting your own composure. You are actively pulling the entire interaction toward your frequency. You are becoming the emotional anchor of the room, and the person who anchors the room is the person who leads it. Think about what this means for every area of your life. In a negotiation, the person who stays calm while the other person gets frustrated will get the better deal. In a relationship, the person who remains centered while the other person spirals will hold the emotional power. In a confrontation, the person who does not flinch will be perceived as the threat, regardless of physical size or verbal ability. This is not opinion. This is the operating system of human social dynamics. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. But there is a deeper layer to this that most people never reach, and this is where Machiavelli's genius becomes truly relevant. It is not enough to be calm. A rock is calm. A sleeping person is calm. Calm, without intent, is just passivity with a better reputation. What you need is calm with voltage, stillness with electricity behind it. The kind of quiet that makes people lean in, not tune out. The kind of silence that feels like a loaded weapon, not an empty room. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote about the prince who makes himself feared without making himself hated. Fear, in this context, is not terror. It is respect, laced with uncertainty. It is the awareness that this person has depth I cannot measure, capacity I cannot predict, and boundaries I do not want to test. That awareness is created not by what you say, but by the space between what you say, not by your actions, but by the implication that your actions, when they come, will be decisive, precise, and irreversible. This is the art of silent authority. And it is an art. Not because it requires talent, but because it requires practice, discipline, and the willingness to unlearn everything that made you loud. Let me show you what this looks like at its foundation. The first thing that must change is your relationship with urgency. Right now, you treat every moment as if it requires an immediate response. Someone texts you, you reply immediately. Someone asks you a question, you answer immediately. Someone provokes you, you react immediately. This constant state of urgency communicates one thing and one thing only. You are available. You are accessible. You are not important enough to have priorities that override this moment. The person who commands respect does the opposite. They create space. Between a question and their answer, there is a pause. Between a provocation and their response, there is a gap. Between a demand and their action, there is a deliberate delay. And in that space, something powerful happens. The other person begins to wonder, what are they thinking? Why are they not responding? Do they know something I do not? That wondering, that slight uncertainty, is the beginning of respect. This is not game playing. This is architecture. You are constructing an experience for the people around you. An experience that communicates depth, control, and intentionality. And the raw material for that construction is time. Your willingness to take it. Your refusal to be rushed. Your understanding that speed is the enemy of power. Machiavelli wrote that a wise prince must never let things drift because of his desire to avoid a war, because the war is not avoided, but only postponed to your disadvantage. But notice the implicit wisdom here. The prince acts when he chooses, not when he is pressured. The timing is his. The initiative is his. He does not react to the battlefield. He shapes it. This is your new operating principle. You do not react to the room. You shape it. You do not respond to the energy around you. You set it. You do not match the pace of other people's urgency. You move at your own speed, and the world adjusts. If you have felt the truth of these words in your bones, not just in your mind, then you are ready for what comes next. Because we are about to move from understanding to application, from philosophy to weaponry, from insight to transformation. Continue watching. The architecture of your new presence is about to be built, one deliberate stone at a time. And now that the foundation has been laid, now that you understand the lie you have been living and the truth that has been hiding behind it, it is time to go deeper. Because understanding is not enough. Knowing that silence holds power is not the same as wielding that power. Knowing that composure commands respect is not the same as being composed. There is a canyon between insight and embodiment, and most people spend their entire lives standing on the edge of that canyon, staring at the other side, never crossing. You are not going to be most people, not after this. What we are about to explore is the anatomy of silent authority, not the philosophy, the anatomy, the specific traits, the specific behaviors, the specific internal shifts that separate the person who is merely quiet from the person who is magnetically powerful. Because make no mistake, not all silence is created equal. Some silence is empty, some silence is weak. But the silence we are building here is a weapon forged in self-mastery, and every edge of it is deliberate. Machiavelli wrote that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, because it belongs to everybody to see you, but to few to come and touch you. Read that again. Let it settle. He is telling you that the world does not experience who you are. It experiences who you appear to be. And appearance is not about deception. It is about architecture. It is about constructing an exterior that accurately reflects the depth of your interior. The problem with most people is not that they are faking strength. It is that their genuine strength is buried under layers of reactivity, anxiety, and desperate need for approval. Strip those layers away, and what remains is authority. What remains is presence. What remains is the kind of person who does not need to perform power because they are power. Let us dissect the 5 pillars of silent authority. These are not suggestions. These are the load-bearing walls of your new identity. Remove any one of them, and the structure collapses. The first pillar is economy of words. This is the most visible and the most misunderstood element of silent authority. Economy of words does not mean being mute. It does not mean refusing to speak. It means understanding that every word you release into the world either adds to your power or subtracts from it. There is no neutral speech. Every sentence you say is either building your fortress or chipping away at its walls. Think about the people you respect most, not the people you like, the people you respect. How do they speak? They do not fill silence with noise. They do not ramble. They do not qualify their statements with endless caveats and apologies. When they speak, it is because they have something to say, not because they are uncomfortable with quiet. And when they finish speaking, they stop. They do not trail off. They do not add unnecessary words to soften the impact. They plant their sentence like a flag and let it stand. Now think about the people you do not respect, even if you would never say it out loud. How do they speak? They over-explain. They repeat themselves. They fill every gap in conversation with words, any words, because silence makes them anxious. They laugh nervously after their own statements. They say things like, "Does that make sense? Yeah, and you know what I mean?" As if they are begging you to validate their right to speak. And every single one of those habits communicates the same thing. I am not sure I deserve to be heard. Machiavelli observed this in the courts of Italy. The advisors who spoke the most were the ones the prince trusted the least, because excessive speech signals excessive need, and excessive need signals weakness. The advisor who spoke rarely, who waited until the room had exhausted its noise before offering a single, precise observation. That was the one who shaped policy. That was the one who held real influence. Not because his ideas were better, but because his delivery made them feel inevitable. Here is how you implement this. Starting now, before you speak in any situation, ask yourself one question. Does this need to be said by me right now? If the answer is not a clear yes, remain silent. Let someone else fill the space. Let the conversation move without your contribution. And notice what happens. Notice how the room begins to wait for you. Notice how when you do speak, heads turn. Notice how your words carry weight they never carried before, simply because you stop diluting them with volume. This is not about being antisocial. This is about being strategic. You are not withdrawing from interaction. You are curating your presence. You are choosing quality over quantity. And in a world drowning in noise, quality is the rarest and most valuable currency there is. The second pillar is controlled body language. Your body speaks louder than your mouth ever will. This is not a metaphor. It is a neurological fact. Research in nonverbal communication has consistently shown that humans derive the majority of their social information not from words, but from posture, movement, facial expression, and the way a person occupies physical space. You can say the most powerful words ever spoken, but if your body is telling a different story, fidgeting, avoiding eye contact, hunching, crossing your arms defensively, your body wins. Every time. The person who commands silent authority has a body that communicates three things simultaneously: calm, confidence, containment. Calm means no unnecessary movement, no tapping, no shifting, no touching your face. Your body is still not because you are rigid, but because you are settled. You have arrived in this moment fully, and you are not trying to escape it. Confidence means open posture. Shoulders back, not in a military way, but in a natural way that says I am not protecting myself from this situation. Chest open, hands visible, eye contact steady and unhurried. Containment means your energy is directed inward, not leaking outward. You are not performing relaxation. You are genuinely composed, and your body reflects it without effort. Machiavelli would have understood this instinctively. In his time, a prince's bearing, the way he walked, the way he sat on his throne, the way he received visitors, was as important as his military strategy. Because the body is the first message. Before a single word is exchanged, the body has already told the other person everything they need to know about the power dynamic. And the person whose body says I am in control before the conversation even begins has already won half the battle. Here is a practical exercise. The next time you're in a group setting, a meeting, a dinner, a social event, consciously slow your movements by 30%. Just 30%. Move your hands more slowly. Turn your head more slowly. Shift your weight more slowly. And watch what happens. People will begin to treat you differently. They will speak to you more carefully. They will give you more space. They will lean in when you lean back. Because slow movement is the body's way of communicating what words cannot. I am not threatened. I am not anxious. I am not in a hurry. I have all the time in the world. And that communicates a level of self-assurance that no amount of verbal confidence can match. The third pillar is emotional sovereignty. This is the invisible foundation beneath everything else. Without this, economy of words is just awkward silence. Without this, controlled body language is just a performance. Emotional sovereignty is the ability to experience an emotion without being controlled by it. It is the space between stimulus and response that Viktor Frankl wrote about, but it is also something Machiavelli understood in deeply practical terms. The prince who is ruled by his emotions is ruled by whoever can provoke those emotions. If your enemy knows that insults make you angry, they will insult you. If your rival knows that exclusion makes you desperate, they will exclude you. If the person across the negotiating table knows that impatience makes you fold, they will drag out the process. Your emotions are levers, and anyone who identifies them can pull them. The only defense is to remove the levers. Not by becoming numb, not by suppressing what you feel, but by developing such a deep relationship with your own interior landscape that no external force can move you faster than you choose to move. This is the hardest pillar to build, because it requires you to confront the parts of yourself you have been avoiding, the insecurity that drives you to seek approval, the fear that makes you overreact to criticism, the loneliness that makes you tolerate disrespect just to maintain connection. These are the real enemies, not the people who disrespect you, not the colleagues who undermine you, not the strangers who dismiss you. The real enemy is the unexamined wound inside you that makes their behavior feel like a threat. Machiavelli wrote that there is no avoiding war. It can only be postponed to the advantage of others. The same is true of inner conflict. You can avoid looking at your triggers. You can avoid confronting your insecurities. But they do not go away. They just operate in the dark, pulling your strings while you believe you are in control. The person who commands real respect has done this inner work. They have sat with their pain, named their triggers, and built a relationship with their emotions that is based on understanding, not avoidance. And that work shows. It shows in the steadiness of their gaze. It shows in the calm of their response. It shows in the unshakable center that nothing and no one can rattle. Let me give you a concrete example of what emotional sovereignty looks like in action. Imagine someone you care about says something that cuts deep. Maybe it is a partner. Maybe it is a close friend. The old you would react immediately. Hurt would flash across your face. Your voice would tighten. You would either lash out or withdraw, both of which are forms of losing control. The person with emotional sovereignty experiences the same hurt. They feel it fully. But between the feeling and the response, there is a gap. A pause, a moment where they observe the emotion, acknowledge it, and then choose, consciously, deliberately, how to respond. Maybe they respond. Maybe they do not. Maybe they address it now. Maybe they address it later, on their terms, in their timing. But the choice is theirs. The timing is theirs. And that control, that sovereignty over their own inner world, is what makes them untouchable. The fourth pillar is strategic observation. Most people walk through life in a state of passive distraction. They are physically present, but mentally elsewhere. They hear conversations, but do not listen. They see people, but do not observe. They exist in the same room as information that could change their lives, and never notice it. The person who commands silent authority does the opposite. They are hyper-present. They observe everything. They listen not just to what people say, but to what they do not say. They watch not just how people act, but how they react. They notice the micro-expressions, the shifts in tone, the hesitations that reveal what words are trying to hide. Machiavelli was, at his core, an observer. His genius did not come from invention, but from observation. He watched the courts. He watched the battles. He watched the alliances form and crumble. And from that observation, he extracted principles that have remained true for 5 centuries. Because human nature does not change. The masks change, the technology changes, the language changes, but the drives, for power, for safety, for validation, for control, remain identical. And the person who learns to observe these drives in real time holds an advantage that cannot be overstated. Here is how this applies to you. In every interaction, there are 2 conversations happening simultaneously. The surface conversation, the words being exchanged, the pleasantries, the stated intentions. And the subtext, the real conversation, happening beneath the words, in the body language, the eye movements, the emotional energy. Most people only hear the surface. They take words at face value. They believe what people say without examining what people mean. And because of this, they are constantly surprised. Surprised when a friend betrays them. Surprised when a deal falls apart. Surprised when a relationship ends. They should not be surprised. The signs were always there. They just were not watching. The person who commands silent authority is always watching. Not in a paranoid way. Not in an anxious way. In a calm, curious, strategic way. They notice who speaks first in a group and who waits. They notice who defers to whom. They notice who touches their face when they are lying, who avoids eye contact when they are uncomfortable, who laughs too loudly when they are nervous. And they store this information, not to manipulate, but to understand. Because understanding is the ultimate form of power. When you understand someone better than they understand themselves, you can navigate any interaction with them. You can anticipate their moves. You can disarm their tactics. You can lead them without them ever realizing they are being led. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote about the fox. The fox recognizes traps, not because it has read about them, not because someone warned it, but because it watches, it observes, it learns from the environment before acting on it. And that quality, the ability to see what others miss because you are paying attention while they are performing, is one of the most potent elements of silent authority. The fifth pillar is deliberate mystery. This is the most counterintuitive element of all, and it is the one that most people resist. Because in a culture of oversharing, where social media has trained everyone to broadcast every thought, every feeling, every meal, every opinion, the idea of deliberately withholding information feels unnatural. But it is precisely because it is unnatural in this culture that it is so powerful. Mystery creates value. This is not just a social principle, it is an economic one. Scarcity increases perceived worth. When something is rare, it is valuable. When something is abundant, it is cheap. And the same applies to you. When you share everything, your plans, your feelings, your opinions, your insecurities, you become abundant. You become known. You become predictable. And predictability is the death of respect. Because why would anyone feel compelled to invest attention in someone they already fully understand? The person who commands silent authority reveals themselves selectively. They share what serves a purpose and withhold what does not. They answer questions without offering more than what was asked. They redirect conversations away from personal territory with grace, not evasion. They leave gaps in their story that other people instinctively want to fill with their own imagination. And imagination, in this context, always works in your favor. Because people will always imagine you to be more than you are, as long as you do not give them evidence to the contrary. Machiavelli understood this with surgical precision. He wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are. This is not an invitation to deceive. It is an observation about the mechanics of perception. People will construct an image of you based on the limited information you provide. And if you provide that information strategically, revealing strength, containing weakness, demonstrating competence, while hinting at depths unseen, the image they construct will be more powerful than any image you could construct through self-promotion. Think of the most compelling people in history, the leaders, the artists, the thinkers who fascinated the world. Were they open books? Did they broadcast every dimension of their personality? Or did they maintain a reserve, a hidden depth, a sense that there was always more beneath the surface than what was visible? The answer is obvious. And the principle applies to you in the same way. You do not need to be extraordinary to command respect. You need to be unknowable, or at least unknowable enough that people cannot dismiss you, cannot categorize you, cannot put you in a box and move on. Now let us take these 5 pillars and place them in the arenas where you actually live your life, because theory without application is entertainment, not transformation. In the professional world, silent authority is your most valuable asset. More valuable than your resume, more valuable than your skills, more valuable than your network, because all of those things are multiplied or diminished by the way you carry yourself. Consider this scenario. You are in a room with people who have more experience than you, more credentials, more status. The old you would try to compensate. You would talk more to prove you belong. You would name drop to establish credibility. You would agree with the most powerful person in the room to align yourself with their authority. And all of these behaviors would communicate one thing: I do not believe I belong here, and I need you to believe it for me. The person with silent authority walks into that same room and does something radical. Nothing. They sit, they observe, they listen. When addressed directly, they respond with precision and brevity. They do not volunteer opinions unless the moment calls for it. They do not perform competence, they embody it. And by the end of that meeting, something strange has happened. The people with more experience, more credentials, more status, they are curious about the quiet one. They want to know what that person thinks. They want to understand why that person seems so comfortable in a room that should have been intimidating. And that curiosity is the seed of respect. This works because of a psychological principle that Machiavelli would have recognized immediately. People do not respect what is freely given. They respect what must be earned. When you hand out your opinions, your attention, your energy freely, people take it and move on. But when you hold back, when you make your contribution something that must be drawn out rather than pushed forward, people assign it greater value. This is not manipulation. This is understanding the economy of social interaction. And in that economy, restraint is wealth. In relationships, whether romantic, familial, or social, silent authority transforms the dynamic entirely. Because relationships are, at their core, power negotiations, not in a cynical way, not in a manipulative way, in a structural way. Every relationship has a balance point, a center of gravity, and that center is determined not by who loves more or who cares more, but by who needs less. The person who needs the least validation, the least reassurance, the least attention, that person holds the center, not because they are cold, not because they do not care, but because their sense of self does not depend on the relationship. Their identity does not collapse when the other person withdraws. Their mood does not swing when the other person is distant. And that stability, that unshakable groundedness, is the most attractive quality a human being can possess. Because it communicates the one thing that everyone craves and almost no one has. I am complete without you. I choose to be here. But I do not need to be here. Machiavelli wrote about this in the context of alliances. The prince who enters an alliance from a position of need is always at a disadvantage. The prince who enters from a position of choice shapes the terms. The same is true in every relationship you will ever have. If you enter from need, needing their approval, their attention, their validation, you hand them power over you. If you enter from choice, choosing to be present, choosing to engage, choosing to invest, you maintain your sovereignty. And that sovereignty, felt but unspoken, is what makes people respect you, and in many cases, love you more deeply. In social interactions, the principles are the same, but the stakes feel lower, which is exactly why most people ignore them. But social dynamics are the training ground for everything else. How you carry yourself at a party, in a casual conversation, in a group of strangers. These micro-interactions are where your habits live. And your habits determine your identity. The person who commands social respect does not try to be the center of attention. They do not tell the loudest story. They do not perform for laughs. They arrive, they engage with genuine interest in others, and they leave people feeling like the conversation was meaningful, not because of what was said, but because of the quality of attention they received. Because the greatest gift you can give someone in a social interaction is your full, undivided, unhurried attention. And the irony is, the person who gives that gift without expecting anything in return is the person everyone remembers, the person everyone wants to talk to again, the person who commands respect without ever asking for it. This is the machinery of silent authority in motion. 5 pillars, 3 arenas, infinite applications, and every single one of them is available to you right now. Not tomorrow, not after some course or seminar or breakthrough, right now. Because the raw material for everything I have described is already inside you. It has been buried under noise, under habits, under years of programming that told you power looks like volume and authority sounds like a raised voice. But it is there, waiting. And what comes next will show you exactly how to dig it out. But the coldest move, the most devastating application of everything we have discussed, is still ahead. Stay with me. Because we are about to move from understanding the architecture to building with it. Brick by brick. Situation by situation. Word by carefully chosen word. Curious to know how this transforms the way you handle conflict, negotiation, and the most difficult conversations of your life? Then do not go anywhere. What follows is the part that changes everything. You have the blueprint. You understand the philosophy. You see the 5 pillars, and you recognize, perhaps for the first time, why your old approach was bleeding your power dry. Good. But understanding without execution is just intellectual entertainment. It is the difference between the person who reads about combat and the person who steps into the ring. And right now, you are stepping into the ring. What follows is not theory. It is weaponry, specific tactics, specific phrases, specific responses to the exact situations that have been stealing your respect for years. Every scenario you are about to encounter has been lived by millions of people. The difference is that now you will have a response that most of them never had. A response forged in the principles of Machiavelli, sharpened by the understanding of human psychology, and designed to shift the balance of power so silently that no one will even realize it happened until it is already done. Let us begin with the most common battlefield: verbal confrontation. Someone disrespects you publicly. Maybe it is a colleague who dismisses your idea in front of the team. Maybe it is a family member who belittles you at dinner. Maybe it is a stranger who crosses a line. The instinct of the untrained mind is to match their energy, to fire back, to show them you are not someone to be pushed around, and that instinct will betray you every single time. Here is the first tactic, and it is devastatingly simple. When someone disrespects you, do not respond immediately. Do nothing for 3 seconds, 3 full seconds. Look at them. Not with anger, not with hurt, with calm, steady attention, as if they have just revealed something about themselves that you find quietly interesting. Then, when those 3 seconds have passed, and the room has gone slightly uncomfortable with the weight of your silence, do one of 2 things. Option 1. You redirect without acknowledging the disrespect. You continue the conversation as if their comment did not register as significant enough to warrant a response. You say something like, "As I was saying," and you proceed with your point. No defense. No counterattack. Just seamless continuation, as if their attempt to derail you bounced off a surface they did not realize was there. This is devastating because it communicates several things simultaneously. It says their opinion does not have enough weight to alter your trajectory. It says you are operating on a level where petty provocations simply do not reach. It says you are so focused on your purpose that distractions are irrelevant, and the person who threw the insult is left standing there, holding a weapon that did not land, wondering what just happened. Option 2. You address it. But you address it on your terms, in your timing, with your framing. You look at them and you say slowly and without a trace of emotion, "That is an interesting approach." Then you pause, and then you continue with your point. You do not explain what you meant. You do not elaborate. You do not attack. You let those 4 words hang in the air like smoke, and you let their imagination do the rest. Because "that is an interesting approach" can mean anything. It can mean I find you amusing. It can mean I see through you. It can mean you have just made a serious tactical error. And the ambiguity is the weapon. The uncertainty is the blade. They will spend the rest of that interaction trying to figure out what you meant. And that mental occupation is a victory in itself. Machiavelli understood that the most effective responses are the ones that create more questions than answers. The prince who explains himself is the prince who justifies himself. And the prince who justifies himself has already conceded that his authority requires justification. Your authority does not require justification. Your composure is your justification. Your presence is your argument, and both are beyond debate. Now let us move to a more nuanced battlefield, the workplace underminer. You know this person. They do not attack you directly. They are too sophisticated for that. Instead, they undermine you quietly. A comment here, a backhanded compliment there. They take credit for your ideas subtly. They exclude you from conversations just enough to be noticeable, but not enough to be provable. They smile at you while positioning themselves above you in every interaction. This is the most dangerous adversary because they operate in the gray zone. Confronting them directly often makes you look paranoid or petty. Ignoring them allows the erosion to continue. Most people get trapped between these 2 options and slowly lose ground. Here's the strategic response, and it requires all 5 pillars operating in concert. First, observe. Do not react to the first instance, or the second, or the third. Watch. Gather data. Understand their pattern. What triggers their undermining behavior? When does it happen? Who is the audience they perform for? What are they trying to achieve? This observation phase is not passivity. It is intelligence gathering. Machiavelli wrote that the first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. Applied here, the first method for defeating an underminer is to understand them better than they understand themselves. Second, build alliances silently. While they are busy undermining you, you are building genuine connections with the people who matter, not by campaigning against your underminer, not by gossiping, by being the person who adds value without drama, the person who is reliable, composed, and consistently excellent. Over time, this creates a contrast that you never need to point out. People will see it on their own. The underminer brings politics. You bring results. The underminer creates tension. You create stability. And people are drawn to stability the way water is drawn downhill. Third, when the moment comes, and it will come, to address the behavior, you do it privately. Not publicly, not in front of an audience. You remove the stage they have been performing on. You sit with them, calm and direct, and you say something like this. I have noticed a pattern in our interactions, and I want to address it directly, because I respect both of us enough to not let it continue in the background. I think we can work together more effectively, and I would like to hear your perspective on how we can do that. Notice what this does. It does not accuse. It does not attack. It does not give them a villain to fight against. It presents you as the reasonable, composed, solution-oriented person and forces them to either rise to that level or expose themselves as the problem. Either outcome benefits you. This is Machiavelli in modern dress. The prince who confronts an adversary with dignity while removing their ability to play the victim is the prince who wins without creating enemies. Now let us talk about negotiation, because this is where silent authority becomes pure gold. Every negotiation in your life, for a salary, a deal, a compromise, a boundary, follows the same invisible structure. The person who speaks less holds more power. The person who shows less need holds more leverage. The person who is willing to walk away holds the strongest position. And silent authority weaponizes all three. Here is a specific scenario. You are negotiating a salary. The hiring manager asks, "What are your salary expectations?" The untrained person answers immediately. They throw out a number, often lower than what they deserve, because silence feels uncomfortable and they want to fill it. The trained person does something different. They pause, they let the question sit, and then they redirect. I am more interested in understanding the full scope of the role and the value I would be bringing. What range does the company have in mind for this position? This single response accomplishes something extraordinary. It transfers the burden of the first move to the other side. It communicates that you are not desperate. It positions you as someone evaluating the opportunity, not begging for it. And it forces the other party to reveal information while you reveal nothing. Machiavelli would have recognized this immediately. The party that reveals its position first is the party that negotiates from weakness. But it goes deeper than tactics. The entire energy you bring to a negotiation shapes its outcome before a single word is exchanged. If you walk in with the energy of someone who needs this deal, they feel it. If you walk in with the energy of someone who wants this deal but does not need it, they feel that too, and they treat you accordingly. Because people do not negotiate with your words, they negotiate with your energy. And your energy is shaped by your internal state. If you have done the work on emotional sovereignty, if you have genuinely reached a place where your sense of worth does not depend on the outcome of this single interaction, that inner freedom radiates outward, and it becomes your most powerful negotiating tool. Here is a phrase that encapsulates this principle. Use it in any negotiation, any high-stakes conversation, any moment where someone is pressing you for an immediate response. The phrase is, "Let me think about that." 4 words, no explanation, no apology, no hedge. Just a calm, definitive statement that you are not going to be rushed, that you operate on your own timeline, that your decision is important enough to warrant deliberation. And every time you use this phrase, you accomplish 2 things. You buy yourself the space to respond strategically rather than reactively. And you communicate to the other person that you are not at their mercy. Both of these outcomes increase your power in the interaction. Let me give you another critical scenario: setting boundaries in personal relationships. This is where most people crumble, because the emotional stakes are highest. Because the person crossing the boundary is often someone you love. And because the fear of conflict, the fear of being seen as difficult, the fear of losing the relationship overrides everything you know about self-respect. Here is the truth Machiavelli would tell you if he were sitting across from you right now. A boundary that is not enforced is not a boundary. It is a suggestion. And people do not respect suggestions. They respect walls. Not walls built from anger, not walls built from punishment, walls built from quiet, non-negotiable clarity. Here is what enforcement looks like in practice. Someone in your life consistently crosses a line. Maybe they disrespect your time. Maybe they dismiss your feelings. Maybe they take advantage of your generosity. The first time it happens, you address it calmly and directly. You say exactly what the boundary is, without emotion, without accusation, without lengthy explanation. Something like, "I need you to understand that when you do this, it is not something I am willing to accept. I am telling you this once clearly because I value this relationship enough to be honest." Notice the structure. You state the boundary. You explain why you are stating it, not to justify yourself, but to frame it as an act of respect for the relationship. And the implicit message, the unspoken part that resonates deeper than anything you actually say, is that this is not a negotiation. This is a notification. You are not asking for their agreement. You are informing them of your terms. If the behavior continues, your response is not more words. Your response is action. You reduce access. You create distance. You withdraw the part of yourself that was available to them, not with drama, not with announcements, not with ultimatums. Quietly, consistently, without malice. And when they notice, and they will notice, and they ask what changed, your response is simple. I told you what I needed. Nothing has changed on my end. This forces them to confront the reality that their behavior had consequences, without giving them the emotional theater they might be expecting. This is one of the most powerful moves you will ever learn, because it teaches people, in the clearest possible terms, that your words carry weight. That when you say something, it is not a suggestion, it is a forecast of what is going to happen. And once people understand this about you, they will respect your boundaries before you even need to state them. Now let us address the arena that most people navigate the worst: group dynamics. Whether it is a social gathering, a team environment, or a family event, groups have invisible hierarchies, and those hierarchies are established within minutes, based entirely on the nonverbal signals each person sends. The person who fidgets, who laughs too eagerly, who agrees with everything, that person is placed at the bottom of the hierarchy, whether they realize it or not. The person who arrives calmly, who makes eye contact naturally, who listens without performing, who speaks only when they have something worth hearing, that person rises to the top, without a single word about status, without a single attempt to impress. Here are specific behaviors that place you at the top of any group dynamic. When someone in the group is speaking, give them your full attention. Do not check your phone. Do not scan the room. Do not think about what you are going to say next. Be fully present with them. This is rare enough in modern life that it creates an immediate emotional impact. The person speaking feels it, and they will gravitate toward you for the rest of the interaction. When multiple people are talking at once and the group is fragmented, do not join the chaos. Wait. Be the one who is comfortable in the crossfire of overlapping voices without needing to add to it. And when the noise dies down, when there is a natural pause, that is when you speak, and the room will listen, because you are the one who was not competing for the floor. You are the one who was waiting, and people instinctively feel that if you waited, what you have to say must be worth the wait. When someone in the group directs a question to you, do not rush your answer. Let half a second pass. Take a breath, then respond. This micro pause does something powerful. It tells the room that you are formulating your response in real time, that you are not regurgitating prepared material, that your answer is being crafted specifically for this moment. And that perceived intentionality elevates everything you say. When you disagree with someone in the group, do not argue. Argue is the language of equals competing. Instead, present your perspective as an observation, not a correction. Something like, that is one way to look at it. Another angle might be. This does not diminish their point. It expands the conversation, and it positions you not as someone fighting for intellectual territory, but as someone operating at a higher altitude, able to see the landscape from above. These are not tricks. These are operating principles. And when you internalize them, when they become reflexive rather than calculated, you will find that group dynamics reshape themselves around you automatically. You become the person people refer to, the person people check in with, the person whose approval people subtly seek. Not because you demanded it, because your presence earned it. Now let me address the mistakes, the errors that will sabotage everything we have built if you are not vigilant. Mistake number 1, confusing silence with absence. Silent authority does not mean disappearing. It does not mean avoiding situations. It does not mean being passive. There is a critical difference between the person who is silent because they are strategically present and the person who is silent because they are afraid to engage. The first is a predator in stillness. The second is prey in hiding. And people can tell the difference instantly. If your silence is accompanied by avoidance, avoiding eye contact, avoiding positions of visibility, avoiding opportunities to contribute, then your silence is not authority, it is retreat. And retreat never commands respect. The fix is simple, but not easy. You must train yourself to be present and silent simultaneously, to be visible and unhurried, to occupy space without filling it with noise. This means showing up, attending the meeting, even if you do not plan to speak much, being at the gathering, even if you intend to observe more than participate. Your physical presence, combined with your composed silence, is what creates the effect. Remove the presence, and the silence becomes irrelevant. Mistake number 2, deploying these tactics from a place of anger. If you are using silence as a weapon of punishment, refusing to speak because you are hurt, withholding attention because you are angry, creating distance because you want them to suffer, you are not exercising silent authority. You are being passive-aggressive. And passive aggression is one of the most transparent, least respectable behaviors a person can display. People see through it immediately, and it destroys trust faster than any argument ever could. Silent authority comes from strength, not resentment, from discipline, not anger, from choice, not reaction. Every time you use these principles, check your motivation. Are you being strategic, or are you being wounded? Are you choosing silence, or are you punishing with it? The external behavior may look the same, but the energy is completely different, and people always feel the energy. Mistake number 3. Inconsistency. You cannot be a person of silent authority on Monday and a reactive, loud, emotional wreck on Tuesday. Consistency is the mortar that holds the pillars together. One outburst can undo months of composed behavior. One reactive moment can shatter the image you have carefully constructed. Machiavelli wrote that men should be treated generously or destroyed, because if you injure a man lightly, he will certainly take revenge. But if you injure him severely, he will not be able to. Applied to your own behavior, partial commitment to these principles is worse than no commitment, because partial commitment creates inconsistency, and inconsistency destroys credibility. This does not mean you will never slip. You are human. There will be moments when the old programming takes over and you react before you catch yourself. The key is not perfection. The key is recovery. When you slip, you acknowledge it internally, you learn from it, and you return to your center. You do not spiral into self-criticism. You do not abandon the project. You simply course-correct and continue. Over time, the slips become less frequent. The center becomes more stable, and the authority becomes second nature. Mistake number 4, telling people about your strategy. This one destroys more aspiring practitioners than any other. The moment you tell someone, "I am working on being more composed," or "I have been practicing silent authority," you have dismantled the effect entirely. Because the power of this approach lies in its invisibility. People must experience it, not understand it. They must feel the shift in your energy, not hear your explanation of it. The moment you explain the mechanism, you reduce it to a technique, and techniques can be dismissed, countered, or mocked. But a genuine transformation in who you are, that cannot be dismissed, because it is not a strategy, it is you. Machiavelli never instructed the prince to announce his strategy to the court. The strategy works because it is woven into the fabric of your being, not because it is displayed on a banner. Keep your inner work private. Let the results speak. And when people ask, and they will ask, what changed about you, simply say nothing and let them wonder. Because wonder is the gift that keeps feeding your authority long after the conversation ends. Mistake number 5, expecting immediate results. This transformation does not happen overnight. The first time you practice a deliberate pause, It will feel awkward. The first time you hold silence, when every cell in your body is screaming at you to speak, it will be uncomfortable. The first time you let a provocation pass without reaction, your ego will revolt. And that is exactly how you know it is working. Growth always feels wrong before it feels natural. The awkwardness is not a sign that the approach is failing. It is a sign that you are operating outside the boundaries of your old identity. And that is precisely where transformation lives. Give yourself time, but not too much grace. Because there is a difference between patience and permission. Patience says, I will get there. Permission says, it is okay if I do not. And the person who commands respect does not give themselves permission to stay weak. They give themselves the patience to grow strong. And there is a world of difference between the two. This is the transformation taking hold. If you have made it this far, something inside you has already shifted. You are not the same person who pressed play on this video. The seeds have been planted. The architecture is forming. And what comes next, the final block of this journey, will seal everything into place. At this point, something has changed in you. You can feel it. A quieter kind of confidence. A settling. As if the noise that has been filling your mind for years has begun to thin, and behind it, there is something solid. Something that was always there, but could never be heard above the chaos. That is the real you beginning to surface. The you that does not need to prove anything. The you that Machiavelli would have recognized as a natural sovereign, not of a kingdom, but of yourself. Stay with me. The final transformation is next, and it will be the one you remember for the rest of your life. You have arrived at the threshold. Everything before this moment was preparation. The philosophy, the pillars, the tactics, the scenarios, all of it was scaffolding, necessary, essential, but scaffolding. What happens now is the construction itself, the final layer. The one that transforms you from someone who understands silent authority into someone who embodies it. And once this layer is in place, it does not come off. It becomes part of you, permanent, irreversible, like a scar that heals into something stronger than the skin it replaced. Let me tell you what has already happened to you, even if you do not fully realize it yet. When you started this video, you were carrying a weight you had stopped noticing. The weight of constant performance. The weight of trying to be enough, loud enough, impressive enough, visible enough, strong enough, for a world that kept moving the goalposts. You were exhausted, not physically, spiritually. You were tired of the game that never seemed to end. Tired of defending yourself. Tired of chasing respect that dissolved the moment you stopped running after it. Tired of being everything to everyone and still feeling like you were not enough for yourself. And now, something has shifted. The weight is not gone. But it is different, because you are no longer carrying the weight of performance. You are carrying the weight of awareness. And awareness is a different burden entirely. It is heavier in some ways, because you can no longer unsee what you have seen. You can no longer pretend that the old strategies work. But it is lighter in the most important way. Because it is yours. It is real. It is not borrowed from someone else's expectations or constructed from society's blueprint. It is the weight of your own truth. And that is the only weight worth carrying. Machiavelli wrote that there is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. He was writing about political revolution, but the principle applies with equal force to personal revolution. What you are doing right now, dismantling the old operating system and installing a new one, is the most difficult and the most rewarding work a human being can undertake. It is difficult because the old system is comfortable. It is familiar. It has been running your life for years, and even though it has been failing you, there is a part of you that clings to it, because at least it is known. The new system is unknown. It is untested in your life, and stepping into it requires the one thing that silent authority is built on, the courage to be still when everything in you wants to move. Let me describe the person you are becoming, not the person you will become someday, the person you are right now, in this moment, if you choose to step fully into what you have learned. You are the person who walks into a room and does not scan it for approval. You walk in and you settle. You find your place, you breathe, and you are present, not performing presence, but actually here, in this body, in this moment, with nothing to prove and nothing to hide. People feel this the way they feel a change in temperature. They may not be able to name it, but they adjust. They orient toward you. Not because you demanded their attention, but because your stillness creates a gravity that their nervous system responds to automatically. You are the person who listens, not the polite, distracted listening that most people confuse with attention, real listening, the kind where the other person feels seen in a way they rarely experience, the kind where your silence is not empty, but full of observation, full of understanding, full of the kind of attention that makes people feel like what they are saying actually matters. And because you give this gift so rarely and so intentionally, it becomes one of the most powerful tools in your arsenal. People will tell you things they have never told anyone. They will trust you with vulnerabilities they guard fiercely from the rest of the world. Not because you manipulated them, because you created the space. And space, in a world suffocating with noise, is the most valuable thing you can offer. You are the person who responds instead of reacts. When life throws its chaos at you, and it will, it always will, you do not flinch. You do not panic. You do not spiral into the old patterns of defensiveness and emotional flooding. You feel the impact. You acknowledge it. And then you choose, deliberately, slowly, with the precision of someone who has trained themselves to see the gap between stimulus and response and to live in that gap. That gap is your kingdom. That gap is where your power resides. And no one, no event, no person, no circumstance can take it from you because it exists inside you, in the space between what happens and what you do about it. You are the person who speaks with weight, not volume. Weight. When you open your mouth, people listen. Not because you are louder, because you are rarer. Because your words have been filtered through a standard most people do not possess, the standard of necessity. You do not speak to fill silence. You do not speak to perform intelligence. You do not speak to seek validation. You speak because you have something that must be said. And that discrimination, that curation of your own voice, is what gives every word the density of stone. You are the person who holds boundaries without apology. You have learned that a boundary stated once, clearly and calmly, is worth more than a boundary argued 100 times with emotion. You have learned that enforcement is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the act of telling the world, this is where I end and where you begin. Cross that line, and something will change, but it will not be my standard. It will be your access. And people respect this. They may not like it in the moment. They may push back. They may test. But underneath the resistance, there is respect. Because everyone, even those who fight boundaries, knows that the person who has them is the person who has value. And the person who does not is the person who will be used until there is nothing left. You are the person who does not chase, not approval, not validation, not love, not respect, not success, not recognition. You have understood, deeply, in the marrow of your bones, that chasing is the activity of the desperate, and desperation repels everything worth having. You move toward what aligns with you. You invest in what reciprocates. You build what matters. But you do not chase, because the person who chases has already communicated, to themselves and to the world, that what they are pursuing is above them. And you are not below anything. You are right here, complete, unfinished perhaps, always growing certainly, but complete, whole, not waiting for someone or something to fill a gap, because the gap was an illusion created by a culture that profits from your feeling of inadequacy. This is the metamorphosis, not a dramatic explosion of change, a quiet settling, like a river finding its course after years of flooding, like a blade being sharpened so slowly that no one notices until it cuts through everything it touches. You are not becoming someone new. You are becoming someone real. And real, in a world of performances, is the most disruptive thing you can be. Now let me consolidate what you have learned, because the mind forgets what the soul needs to remember. Silent authority begins with the understanding that power is not loud. It is still. The most powerful person in any room is not the one making the most noise. It is the one whose silence creates the most gravity. When you understand this, you stop competing for attention and start commanding it. Naturally, effortlessly, inevitably. Silent authority is built on 5 pillars. Economy of words. Speak less, and what you speak carries more. Controlled body language. Your body communicates before your mouth opens, so make sure it is telling the story of someone who is settled, not someone who is scrambling. Emotional sovereignty. The ability to feel without being controlled by what you feel, to observe your own interior without being swept away by it. Strategic observation. The discipline of watching before acting, listening before speaking, understanding before responding. Deliberate mystery. The power of withholding, of leaving space for imagination, of being knowable enough to connect, but unknowable enough to fascinate. Silent authority operates in every arena. In the professional world, it elevates you above the noise of office politics and posturing. In relationships, it creates the kind of magnetic stability that draws people toward you and keeps them there. In social dynamics, it positions you at the center without you ever having to compete for the position. In conflict, it makes you the immovable object that forces the other person to reckon with their own momentum. In negotiation, it gives you the leverage that comes from being the person who needs the least and therefore holds the most. Silent authority is not an act. It cannot be faked. It can only be built. Through the patient, uncomfortable, often painful work of confronting your own patterns, dismantling your own reactivity, and constructing an interior architecture that matches the exterior you want to present. This work is not glamorous. It does not produce overnight results. But it produces something better, a permanent transformation that does not depend on circumstances, does not waver with mood, and does not collapse under pressure. Now let me give you the paradox, the final truth that ties everything together in a way that might seem contradictory until it suddenly, viscerally, makes sense. The paradox is this. The ultimate expression of silent authority is not controlling others. It is releasing the need to. Read that again. Sit with it. Everything we have discussed, the tactics, the principles, the scenarios, might seem, on the surface, to be about gaining power over other people, about commanding their respect, about positioning yourself above them. But that interpretation misses the deeper truth. The deeper truth is that silent authority is not about them at all. It is about you. It is about the relationship you have with yourself. It is about reaching a place so solid, so grounded, so deeply rooted in your own worth, that other people's opinions, reactions, and behaviors become irrelevant. Not because you are arrogant, but because you are complete. Machiavelli is often misread as a teacher of manipulation, but at the core of his work is a more profound message. The ruler who depends on the approval of the crowd will always be enslaved by the crowd. The ruler who depends on no one's approval but his own is the only one who is truly free. And freedom, real freedom, the kind that lives in the chest and radiates outward, is the ultimate source of authority. Because the person who is free does not need to command respect. They embody it. They do not need to demand compliance. They inspire it. They do not need to control others. They are so busy controlling themselves that others naturally fall into orbit. This is the paradox. By mastering yourself, you master every room you walk into. By needing nothing from anyone, you receive everything. By becoming the person who does not need respect, you become the person who receives it most abundantly. Not because you manipulated the system, but because you transcended it. You stopped playing the game of social hierarchy and started existing at a level where the game's rules no longer apply to you. And this is where the journey becomes deeply personal. Because I can give you principles. I can give you tactics. I can give you scenarios and scripts and frameworks, but I cannot give you the thing that matters most. The willingness to do the inner work. The courage to sit with your own discomfort. The discipline to practice these principles when no one is watching, when there is no reward, when the old patterns scream at you to revert. That willingness, that courage, that discipline, those come from a decision. A decision you make not once, but every single day. The decision to be the person you know you are capable of being, not the person your habits have turned you into. The decision to choose architecture over impulse, strategy over reaction, depth over noise. The decision to honor the version of yourself that emerged during this video, the version that felt something shift, that recognized something true, that saw the old patterns for what they are and decided, quietly but definitively, to leave them behind. That decision is the most powerful thing you will ever do. More powerful than any tactic. More powerful than any framework. More powerful than any book, any video, any teaching. Because it is the moment you stop being a student of power and start being a source of it. And here is the final truth. The one that Machiavelli hinted at, but never stated directly, because some truths can only be discovered, not taught. The person who commands the most respect in any room is not the one with the most authority. It is the one with the most peace. The one who has nothing to prove, nothing to defend, nothing to justify. The one whose silence is not strategy, but nature. Whose composure is not technique, but identity. Whose presence is not performance, but simply the overflow of a deeply settled soul. That is what you are building. Not a mask, not a persona, not a character you put on in public and take off in private. You are building you, the real you, the version that has been buried under decades of noise and reactivity and desperate, exhausting performance. And as that version emerges, slowly, steadily, irreversibly, everything around you will change. Not because you forced it, but because you allowed it. You allowed yourself to be still. You allowed your silence to speak. You allowed the world to see, for the first time, what has been hiding behind the noise. And when they see it, they will not look away. If this message has resonated in you, not in your mind, but somewhere deeper, somewhere that does not have a name, then I have one final request. Comment below the phrase, "My silence is my authority." This is not a comment. It is a declaration, a silent pact between you and the version of yourself you are choosing to become. It is a line drawn in the sand. On one side, the old you, reactive, loud, desperate for validation. On the other side, the new you, composed, powerful, complete. By typing those words, you are stepping across that line, and lines, once crossed with intention, cannot be uncrossed. And if you found value in what we have built here today, if something in these words has shifted the way you see yourself and the world around you, then subscribe to this channel, not as a casual gesture, not as a mindless click. Subscribe as an act of commitment, a declaration that you are ready to continue this work, that you are joining a fortress, a community of individuals who have decided that noise is cheap, that silence is power, and that the most dangerous person in any room is the one who has mastered themselves. This is not entertainment. This is architecture. And every video on this channel adds another layer to the structure you are building. A structure of silent authority, of composed power, of the kind of respect that is not demanded, but radiating. And now, the farewell. Go, not loudly, not with a battle cry. Go the way you will move from now on, silently, deliberately, with the kind of purpose that does not announce itself, but is felt by everyone who stands in its path. Go and be the stillness that terrifies the chaos. Be the pause that commands the room. Be the silence that says more than 1,000 words ever could. Machiavelli wrote for princes. But the truest kingdom is not a territory on a map. It is the territory inside you. The territory of your mind, your emotions, your responses, your presence. Conquer that territory, and every room you walk into becomes your throne room. Every conversation becomes your court. Every interaction becomes an opportunity to demonstrate, without a single word, that you are someone who has mastered the only thing that truly matters: yourself. Go now, and let your silence be your loudest statement. Let your composure be your sharpest weapon. Let your peace be the authority that no one can challenge, no one can take, and no one can deny. Because from this moment forward, you are not asking for respect. You are the reason it exists.